Call the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting to order. It's Tuesday, September 14th, 2021. It's a regular meeting. And the first action item is to approve the minutes of August 17th, August 31st, and September 1st. Daniel, you have anything to say about that?
I do. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of August 17th, 31st, and September 1st.
Great. Daniel has made a motion to approve the minutes of August 17th, August 31st, and September 1st. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Seeing none, the motion is passed. Thank you very much. I have no remarks today, and other than to say that we have had a busy day working on finding a new town manager. So, town manager, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Not this evening, other than the ones I have on items on the agenda. Thank you.
Great. Are there any select board members who have comments or committee reports? Okay.
Oh, I have a committee announcement. The Traffic Safety Committee will meet this Thursday morning at 8 a.m. on Zoom. And if somebody wished to go in person, they could go to the Selectboard meeting room at 8 a.m. as well. There is always a public participation element to that meeting, as well as the warned agenda.
Great. And Daniel, I assume when we're talking about traffic safety matters, you might want to weigh into that new business as well, from your perspective as a committee member.
Yes, thank you for reminding me.
Great. All right, public participation. Is there someone from the public who would like to speak about a matter that is not on tonight's agenda? I see a hand. Kurt Dames. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, Madam Chair. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm glad to see your parrot back on your shoulder.
Thank you. By the way, well, no by the ways, I'll get right to the point. Thank you. As a town meeting rep, I am very glad to see that the representative town meeting is finally represented on the front page of the Brattleboro government website. It's long overdue and very, very welcome. As some people might not know, there is another branch of town government. And so you've raised the bar. Now that you've raised the bar, I'm going to ask you to raise a little bit more. The resolution that Brattleboro Common Sense brought to the representative town meeting in 2010, 2011, and 2018, and which you recently approved for using renewable energy in the town buildings, also had another term which was overlooked at your meeting in February. That was to recommend that the representative town meeting members recommended using renewable energy, renewable electricity, such as cow power, in their homes. I thought this is that's a substantial action, a substantial move for the representative town meeting to take. And it's also pretty serious move for people to take too. And I thought that should be represented on the front page, on the homepage of the website too, along with other significant actions. I hope you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Air 1120.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Rothberg. I want to address and talk to the council about the noise ordinance. I'm hopeful you can hear me. Can you?
Yes.
Okay. We have a noise ordinance, and one of the subsections is firearms. Vermont is a constitutional carry state. It is a constitutional hunt on your own land state. But in Western Brattleboro, in the rural areas, if you use your gun for target practice, your neighbor can call the police on you and have them come visit you in violation of this noise ordinance. It also allows your neighbor on section K, which is noise in general, politely to call the police if your dirt bike they think is too loud, your leaf blower is too loud, your tractor is too loud. It seems that the police have a lot of other more important things to do. And also in a rural area such as parts of Brattleboro, it seems a little bit controlling of people's rights to enjoy their land. And I would like the select board to revisit this and look at this, as Vermont has a law already on the books that you cannot shoot your gun from sundown to sun up. Most of our other noise ordinances also have a time from sun up to sundown, 7 p.m. to 9 a.m., etc. Except this particular one within firearms, it's just a blanket statement. And it seems to go against, the Vermont Constitution by itself.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Can I just make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
I think there's a couple things going on. There's the question of the noise ordinance, and then there's also a discharge of firearms ordinance that does exist in certain areas of Brattleboro. And I saw a map once that shows the areas. So I'm just curious how those might overlap. And it's just, I can go ahead and look into that for you. And
Well, it's not a warned item.
oh, certainly. I just wanted to let the
And
know that it's something I could happily look into.
I will ask the town manager to look into it. And I think that's all we should say about that tonight. Unless Daniel still has his hand up, which he does.
Yeah, thanks. I guess with both of those comments, I sort of wanted to just raise like how a member of the public would get our attention on something and how that would become a warned item on agenda that could have some discussion and some possible action. And so just kind of remind folks about that. So
Peter, would you like to address that for us, please?
Sure. So when an item is requested of the select board, the chair and the vice chair in the first instance decide whether or not to warn it for consideration by the full select board. And if they decide not to, if the two of them agree that it won't go on the agenda, then it doesn't go on the agenda. If the two of them are split on the question of whether or not it goes on the agenda, then that question is put to the full board at the next meeting as a question of simply whether or not to have it added to the agenda for the following meeting. And if the chair and the vice chair decide not to put something on, then the other three members are advised of that decision, so that you might raise it, under your comments or in some other manner for the full board to consider, in the same manner that the full board considers split votes.
thanks.
Okay. So that leaves us with the consent agenda. There are several items on the consent agenda. I've forgotten, do we read those things and then have a motion? I've forgotten the procedure for the consent agenda, Peter.
So I can name them if you'd like. The 5 items on the consent agenda tonight are 3 grants: a library courier grant, a field to fork grant that's a collaboration between the library, the sustainability coordinator, and community organizations. The Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant, and then 2 other items, one asking you to designate me, as you have in the past, to be the town's voting delegate at the annual business meeting of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. and the award of the heating oil contract for this coming winter based on the bids that were opened this past week by the school district.
Great. Does anyone have a motion for me?
Sure. I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Great. Jessica has moved to approve the consent agenda as presented. All select board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, were there any no's? I didn't see any, but I just thought I'd ask. No, okay, the motion is carried 5-0. Thank you very much. And lo and behold, we're liquor commissioners. Would anyone like to? Ian?
I move that we convene as liquor commissioners.
Great. All in favor of convening as liquor commissioners, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 5-0. We are in fact liquor commissioners. So we have a liquor license. Mr. Ella, would you like to discuss that with us?
Sure. The application before you tonight is for a first-class liquor license, third-class liquor license, and entertainment license for the Collective Lounge and Bar. The Collective Lounge and Bar is an establishment that is in the same space as where the Metropolis was on Elliott Street. They have been operating for a little while now, serving mocktails. Kate Berry has joined us here in the meeting to describe what has been happening and what they would like to have happening there so that you can give consideration to this tonight. I would say before she speaks that the staff has reviewed this, as we do with all liquor license applications, and have found it to be in order and ready for your approval.
Great. So Kate Berry, what would you like to tell us?
Thanks so much for taking us into consideration. Myself, my partner, Marty Griffin, he's at the town hall right now here too. So we're both representing. We're hoping to bring back a space, a lounge, a bar there, kind of an homage to what it used to be about maybe 8 years ago. It was like a wine bar, cocktail lounge. We have been specializing in mocktails. I make my own simple syrups. Marty has been making, mocktails for a long time. We've been focusing on mostly, providing some really good food and creating a space that's very accessible and kind of low key, a lounge. And we would like to, use our entertainment license to bring back events like weekly open mic night, karaoke. We don't plan on doing any like big bands, we won't be doing like the funk night or the metal nights that used to happen there. Any music, entertainment that we do will maybe be one or two folks, doing things like singer-songwriter expos, like I said, open mic. So we plan on keeping it low key and kind of being also like a spot where you can go after 9 o'clock and hang out and, get late night food. We're gonna have food to go. We really want to expand our food menu to be something that's like, just, if you get out of work after 9 o'clock, you can go somewhere and get something to eat. So that's about it. I should have introduced myself. My name's Kate Berry. I've been in food and service restaurants almost my whole life. My parents were caterers. I worked when it was the old Metropolis. I managed it for about 4 years, and then also worked there when Arkham was open. So I'm very familiar with the space. I'm really familiar with, how kind of it used to be, and we're really excited to bring it back and hope that we can, when we do add on the liquor license, we are still going to be a very kind of all-inclusive mocktails forward still space. We really want it to not just turn into, oh, it's just a bar, and drinking is the main purpose. Like, drinking is not the main purpose. The main purpose is creating a space where you can come and view artists, view music, meet up with friends, have game nights, trivia nights. We really want it to be like fun, safe, clean, nighttime, late night event space. So that's it.
Great. Now, I think your partner's in the meeting room. Would he like to speak?
Name's Marty Griffin. That's
Marty.
Kate, her partner, yes.
Mhm.
Hello, everyone. Just to add on what Kate was talking about too, we want this to be a event space, a community space to talk about community issues as well. We want to be active part of downtown. I, for one, worked at Echo and Fireworks before Echo existed. I worked at Fireworks as well, over 6 years at the Whetstone. So I've had some pretty good leaders in this industry, I think, with David Heiler, the Brady's, Aaron Sprendell, Brian Ingalls as restaurateurs in this area. So we just want to build on that successful business that celebrates its community, that's a part of its community, not about just making money and being in that space, but be active in that space. And we've already had 2 successful little soft openings and gallery walk situations. One of our artists has already sold 4 pieces by hanging on our space. That's how we want to utilize that space. We got a new artist coming in at the end of this month as well for the next gallery walk. So we just want to embrace art, music, the community as a whole, and honestly try to help it grow.
Well said, Marty.
I'm gonna say
myself.
All right. Are there select board members who would like to comment on this application? Ian.
I'm just excited about a late night option in Brattleboro. So thank you for taking this on, and I think it's going to be a real tribute to the town. So I'm excited to go.
We really hope that it inspires other business owners. I want them to see that we can bring it back, and we can be a space that, celebrates not only drinking activities, and we want it downtown to be a place where people come, not just for our space, but because of the nightlife downtown. It used to, when I moved here 10 years ago, there was music everywhere, lots of late night stuff, and I know we can bring it back. And a lot of people have moved here in the last year, and they need a place to go. So we can't be the only space. Hopefully there'll be enough, enough pie for everyone to feel like they can, start in and do something similar.
And Daniel.
If you had something to say, Liz, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, is the name collective relating to the arts?
It's kind of relating to the whole concept. It's a collective lounge and bar. So it's a lounge before it's a bar. The bar is kind of the secondary thing. The collective is really speaking to wanting to be all inclusive, wanting to be all accessible, embracing kind of whatever people want to do. If we want to have more art, more music, more special event nights, community nights, networking events, things like that. So just that's where the name came from.
Great. Daniel?
Thanks. Hey, Kate. I am a non-alcohol drinker, but I do like to drink tasty things, and it's so boring to go to a bar and just have club soda. So I appreciate the mocktails, and I do hope that stays. So you're open Monday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, is that right?
That's right. And we're hoping, though, when we get the liquor license, we'll be able to open 7 days a week. We just trained one full-time bartender. We've got a full-time bar back, and we are going to be hiring another bartender in the next few weeks, get them trained up. We're also offering a pretty competitive compensation plan. We pay all our bartenders $15 an hour plus tips. And, on average, when we're getting really going, you can make a couple $100 a night in tips. So we want the people that work for us to work for us for a really long time, and for it to be a job where, they're earning enough to stay and live in Brattleboro. That's a really important thing for us, is keeping locals employed and employing them in a sustainable way. Hopefully I'm a new-ish business owner, but I'd love to get to the position in maybe a year or two where we can offer healthcare, or we can offer other types of benefits, paid time off, things that you don't see in the restaurant industry. But since COVID has happened, it's very clear that if we are going to be well employed, we need to offer sustainable compensation packages. So that's something we're really committed to.
Great, thank you. I actually had one other thing I wanted to say. So, and it follows on from what you're saying. So I was just down in New York last week, and in New York State now, they're requiring proof of vaccination to go to places like bars, restaurants, movie theaters, concerts, and whatnot. And, you know, given that bars are one of the highest risk environments for folks to be in, even in a highly vaccinated community like ours, would you consider carding people for
We've kind of deferred to, we're listening to our local and state governments in terms of.
All right, well.
If you guys say that's what we need to do, that's what we're gonna do. It's
all right.
both, yeah, that's
Thank you.
That.
That's all I need to know.
Okay.
Ball's in your court, Daniel.
Yeah, great. I look forward to talking about it later.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta pass the buck on that one.
Tim,
Oh, I just wanted to say thanks for bringing new life to a space that many of us know and love. And it sounds like you're really doing it in a forward-thinking and responsible way for the employees and everybody in the community. So thank you to both of you. Marty, I know you're still there somewhere.
Thank you. It's been, we've gotten a really great reception on this from everywhere, so we really appreciate it, and look forward to opening and getting our liquor license secured and start doing, you know, we're going to start it pretty calm. You know, we're going to just kind of introduce wine, you can add liquor to the mocktails menu that we have. So that's how we're going to structure it. It's mocktails first. If you want to add in, you know, you can even do a half a shot, a full shot. We'll make it so you can really tailor, because that's the thing is, people I think want to come back and socialize. They don't necessarily want to become inebriated, and we all are kind of re-socializing ourselves. So slow and steady.
Ian, did you have another comment?
No, I just had a motion.
Oh, very nice. Just want to make sure Jessica doesn't have anything she'd like to say before we move.
I just love the story that you guys worked in local restaurants and now you're like flying on your own. And I'm so proud to see you do that. And so
Cool. Thanks, Jess.
it was really fun coming in there.
Yeah.
Gallery walk.
Thank you. Thanks. It was a lot of hard work, and you know, a lot of people came together to help us put the space in there too, which has been really cool. Yeah, we're excited.
Great. Ian?
So I move to approve a first and third class liquor license and an entertainment license for the Collective at 55 Elliott Street.
Great. Ian has moved to approve a first class and third class liquor license and an entertainment license for the Collective at 55 Elliott Street. All select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All right, 5-0. The motion has carried. Congratulations, Kate and Marty.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now let's, I'll take a motion. Thank you, Jess.
I would like to make a motion. Can I do this all at once? To adjourn as liquor commissioners and convene as water and sewer commissioners.
Ooh, tricky.
Wow.
Wow. All in favor of
Oh,
Jess'
no.
motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners and to open up as water and sewer commissioners, please raise your hand and say aye.
Hi.
Okay, motion carried. We are now water and sewer commissioners. And I would like to invite Chrissy Haskins to discuss that with us. No, the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facilities Replacement Project.
Good evening, thank you. So this is a just a status update on the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Plant project. The contractor has begun work there. They mobilized in mid-July. So they've been actively working on site for about 2 months now. To date, they have installed a lot of their temporary piping and utilities. There's a lot of temporary pipe that needs to be installed to work around the building excavation area and the existing lagoons. So they've got a lot of that done. The temporary electric connection was made yesterday, so we actually shut the plant down for a little while yesterday and made the electric connection to the temporary service. Cable and phone are all temporarily connected. They have, they're in progress on the equalization basin. The concrete slab is done for that, and they are in progress on the rebar and forming for the walls. They're going to be starting their excavation shoring tomorrow for the building excavation. And then once that's complete, probably early next week, they'll start excavating for the building. The goal for them is to get all of the yard piping, rough grading, and foundation completed this year. And then they anticipate a winter shutdown in December. That's mostly due to the fact that they won't be getting structural steel until January or February, just because of supply chain delays right now. They'll restart in April when at that time they'll pour the slab for the building and start actually building the new treatment plant building. We anticipate substantial completion in November or December of next year, so 2022. The new plant will go into service probably in early fall next year. And that's assuming no major lead time issues. Grass restoration and final paving is probably going to be delayed until spring 2023, just because we don't want to do the final paving when it's so cold in December, and grass doesn't grow very well then. So we'll hold off on that until spring. They'll come back and do all that work. And I just wanted to note that the contractor is keeping us pretty well up to date on supply chain delays and their material lead times. They're updating us weekly on that. And as of last Thursday, they informed us that they are on schedule. And then one thing we would like to note, it comes up, we have weekly meetings with the contractor, and every week they note that there is still some folks walking through or biking through the construction site. Now I understand that people have become accustomed to coming through there and walking out into the trails in the woods there. But we are really asking folks to stay out of the construction site. There are some other ways you can access those trails. And if anybody needs some information on that, I'm sure Public Works can help you out with that. But we really need folks to stay out of the construction site, because we're going to be starting to move around with some really heavy materials and working overhead, and it's becoming a safety issue.
And is it, Peter, are those trails, is there signage to discuss the fact that it's a construction site? And
We'll make sure that there is. The site itself is secure, but also, over the years has been used for public recreation. And as long as folks are just, using the woods and not doing any harm in the area, we've always allowed that. So we may need to make clearer to folks who arrive there thinking they still can, that for now, while the construction is underway, we need folks to go around, and there's plenty of other beautiful spots up there on the hill that folks can use.
thank you, Peter. Chrissy, is that it on this matter? Is this the update complete?
Just to follow up on what Peter just said, there are some signs up there. The contractor's putting up some more signs indicating work zone. Public Works Department has made some small signs indicating that it's a construction zone and to steer clear of the area. But I believe Public Works is in the process of getting some bigger, more obvious signs,
Right,
to warn folks of that.
Great.
I see Dan Tyler nodding his head as Chrissy said that, so we'll
And is there
we'll
anything?
bolster what we've got out there.
Great. Okay. Chrissy, would you like to talk about the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund?
I had one question.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ian.
One quick question, Chrissy. So October 2022 is the substantial completion date versus the 2023 complete completion date, I guess, or I was wondering, so will the plant actually be operational in October 2022, or is and it's just the final paving that will take longer? Or what's the distinction between the two dates and the difference between substantial completion and completion?
Sure, that's a great question. So substantial completion means that generally the work, all of the work in the contract has been completed. And obviously in this case, we won't have final paving done and the grass won't be growing. And those are little minor things that we can usually push out into the punch list work. But basically the big part of substantial completion is that the finished product is operational, that the town can use it. So the plant will be operational next fall, assuming that we don't have any major lead time or supply chain delays. But as of right now, we are expecting the plant to be operational next fall. And then we'll have substantial completion, meaning everything's in operation, everything's running, you know, as designed and as it should be. We'll do a punch list at that point. So we'll walk through, we'll make a list of all outstanding items that the contractor needs to do. The grass restoration and the final paving will be on that list. We'll then shut down for the winter. And then in the spring, the contractor can finish up all their restoration and minor items. And we have final completion at that point.
Great, thank you.
Are there other select board members who have questions on this matter? Okay, so Chrissy, would you like to discuss the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund? Or
Yes.
Dan, would you like to?
I can kick it off. We've been talking about this with Chrissy for a while, doing a deeper dive and study into our distribution system. And this opportunity has come up to hopefully get some planning money to study the distribution system, and that'll put us in a position for future funding opportunities. Chrissy can speak to the details of this opportunity, but.
Great, thank you. Chrissy? Are there details?
So Sure. So as Dan noted, this is something that we've talked about for a little while now. And it was originally talked about as, once we're done with the treatment plant and things have settled down a little bit, let's get an evaluation done on the distribution system, which will help the town prioritize capital projects during the capital planning process. We actually, so for this year's Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, they announced that they would be offering 100% forgiveness up to $100,000 on planning loans that incorporate a hydraulic evaluation, which is exactly what we had proposed to do. So in order to apply for this funding opportunity, the town would need to submit a planning loan application signed by the select board. And we've prepared the application, and I believe you have a copy of that. So just a little, I'll just go through the memo that I had provided for everyone, for the public's sake. The Brattleboro Water Department has focused a lot of their planning efforts in the past several years on the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility. This included the asset management plan, followed by preliminary and final design planning for the water treatment facility upgrade. The water department intended to perform an evaluation of the distribution system once the water treatment facility project was completed. However, with the opportunity of 100% forgiveness in the 2021 Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program for such a project, we recommended to the town that the timeline for this evaluation be moved up to take advantage of what is basically a grant. My company, Dufresne Group, developed a hydraulic water model of the distribution system in 2015 for the Black Mountain Tank Replacement Project. That model was used to evaluate the tank, but we never used it to do a full distribution system evaluation. We do still use the model to evaluate various scenarios, but it should be updated there's been some work done that is not in the model right now. The proposed scope of work for the evaluation project would include updating the existing hydraulic water model, performing asset management for the entire distribution system, and the retreat wells, and performing a hydraulic evaluation of the entire distribution system, and preparing a preliminary engineering report to summarize all of the existing conditions and evaluations and recommendations for improvements. The benefits of this are that at the completion of the project, the town would have a complete asset management plan for all components in the water system, including treatment, storage, pumping, valves, and piping. This may provide access to additional funding incentives in the future, because in recent years, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund has offered, in certain years, additional forgiveness for systems that have a complete asset management plan. The town will also have a preliminary engineering report with the distribution system improvement project recommendations, prioritizations, and costs, which will provide a base for future funding applications for final design and construction of distribution system projects if the town chooses to utilize the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund for future projects. The report would also provide a basis for annual capital improvement planning, and it will serve as a long-range plan. The schedule for this would be to submit the loan application, as soon as it's approved. Hopefully receive loan approval by, sometime in October of this year, and then begin the project late this fall and continue throughout next year, with completion probably next fall sometime. I had listed December, but probably sometime next fall. And then I also wanted to note that if the 100% forgiveness has already been fully allocated to other projects by the time we submit the complete application to the state, then you don't need to move forward with the project. We don't have to do the evaluation right now. And the planning work can be put on hold, awaiting either the end of the treatment plant project or when another grant opportunity arises.
Thank you. I'm sure everyone would be in favor of 100% forgiveness. The one thing that I didn't see in your memo was how much this study would cost and how much the loan is requested for.
Sure. So we decided to take full advantage of that and go for the $100,000. That's why we incorporated the asset management in there. It's something that the town's actually had on the back burner for a couple of years now, and just hasn't had time to get around to doing. So we figured, let's just throw all of it in there, and if we can get it all forgiven, that would be great.
Okay, good to know. Select board members have any questions about this? Ian.
Yeah, so I think I understand this whole setup. And so I think I'm making a couple of assumptions, and if I'm incorrect, then I apologize and please correct me. But so we're trying to push this forward now because we can hopefully get it essentially a grant so we can get it fully paid for. But if we do it now, then the entire reevaluation of our water system would be done prior to the implementation of the new water treatment facility that we're building. But the idea is if we do it now, we get it fully paid for. If we don't get the grant, then we can delay it until after the facility is done and a new funding mechanism maybe comes up and we can get it for free again. So I guess my question is, how much will the new hydraulic water model, the one that we would do in 2021 before the facility was done, and the new hydraulic evaluation of the distribution system be impacted by the fact that like 1 year in the future, we'll have a brand new water treatment facility? Like, will the model become essentially obsolete in 1 year? And are we being penny wise and pound foolish to get a grant to get this thing done for free, but then now be stuck with a model for however many years until we do a new one that's based on a water facility plant that was only there for 1 more year until we got a brand new one?
Such a good question.
So that is a great question. And we are already getting submittals for all of the pumps that we're going to have in the new plant. So actually I just got the shop drawing submittal for that today. So we will have the pump information that's going to be the finished water pumps that'll be in the new plant. We will have all of that information and all the pump curves that we need for the new pumps that we can put into the water model. So we can actually create the water model based on what the plant will look like when it's done next year.
And that could go into the one that we would be doing this year. So we kind of be like creating sort of a hypothetical what the facility is, even though the facility itself isn't. Okay.
And just a further clarification, layperson to layperson, that's
Yeah.
how this technical work would be done anyway, is through the creation of a model so that they can then run different scenarios on how our system functions. So the methodology is sound by using the specifications for the equipment that is going into the plant.
Jess?
This is a question for Dan. So Dan, I'm curious, like, if we get really ambitious and tackle this project early and now, will that set us up well for future water system infrastructure projects?
Yeah, it's really going to set us up to really nail down our capital plan, and we'll be able to prioritize the parts of the system that need it the most, and also put us in a position to be ready to receive funding when it becomes available for those projects in the future. So definitely puts us in a much better position than we're in now. A lot of we have capital planning now, but a lot of it's just based on historical knowledge of the system and areas that we believe to be too small or aging. And, this would really put all the pieces together and really validate that.
This is sort of a follow-up question. Just that the new treatment plant may have impacts on some of the older parts of our system. Is that true? And will this help us understand that better?
There shouldn't be a lot of, this is more of a analysis of the system. So all the piping downstream of the treatment plant, and most of that is going to remain. We're not really changing any of that. And the storage tank at Pleasant Valley is going to remain the same. So as far as the new treatment plant goes, it's really just the pumps that get it to the tank. From the tank down, there's not a whole lot of difference.
Okay. Anyone else?
No, but thank you though. Fair.
Yeah, this is all very interesting. There's a potential motion to be made.
I'll make it.
Dan.
Let's see. Right here. Make sure I get the right one. I move to authorize an application to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund for a planning loan that incorporates a hydraulic evaluation.
Great. Daniel has moved to authorize an application to the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund for a planning loan that incorporates a hydraulic evaluation. All select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, Chrissy and Dan, would you like to discuss the Pleasant Valley water treatment facilities? Ratifying the emergency purchase of replacement blower?
Those next two items will be Dan's. And thank you, Chrissy, for your.
Thank you,
Chrissy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chrissy could do them if she'd like, but. So the first one is an expenditure at the Pleasant Valley facility. The facility, the filters, the water filters in the facility backwash using two large air blowers that essentially blow out the media and clean the media. One of those failed, leaving us with one, and they're critical infrastructure for the plant. Unfortunately, we couldn't run for the next year and a half with just one blower. So we had to go out and find a replacement blower. The operators found a blower, installed it as quickly as possible, and got everything back online. And the cost of that blower was $11,421.
Great.
The second expenditure was at the retreat wells. In preparation for the increased demand on the wells, we hired a company to come in and they refresh the wells. So they pull the pumps out and backflush the wells to remove any sediment from the screens and clean the pumps up and just, kind of give everything a refresh and a clean. And in that process, they discovered that the number 3 well pump was in need of some pretty significant repairs. So the expense of that came in at $18,000, which was more than we anticipated. We didn't anticipate doing any pump work with those repairs.
And I'll just add before you act on these that we're before you tonight on both of these for ratification because of the urgent nature of the work. It's, 2 different circumstances, but they have the same situation of how the work had to be done or else essential facilities would have stopped functioning. So we went ahead and did it and paid for it and are asking you to ratify our decision to do that.
And can we have a motion with both items in it?
You can if you're clear enough about the 2 expenses that you're ratifying.
Does anyone have any questions about these 2 motions? Jessica?
I do. Just curious where the funds come from when an emergency expense like this comes up.
So this is, I'm sorry. So that's paid for from the utility fund in this case. Same as it would have been if we had in the first instance come to you and said, we got to go do some reconditioning of a well. It's going to cost $18,000. Please approve it so we can get it done. It's just the process is different when we have to address it urgently like this, but the source of funds is the same. And that's also true in the general fund and in the parking fund when circumstances like that arise. It doesn't negatively affect the budget in the end. It's just the process by which the expenditure is made and approved.
Thank you.
Yes, Ian.
And will the new Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility use the same blowers?
They're not the same blowers. The new blowers will be different size and probably much more efficient than these. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to use this, but
Yeah,
we need it in the meantime.
totally.
Anyone else have any comments? How do we feel about a double motion? Jim?
Good. I raised my hand. It wasn't there at first, so did it again. I'll make a couple of motions.
Great.
If that's all right with you, Madam Chair. I move to ratify the emergency purchase of a replacement air blower for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility from IPS Pump Company for $11,421. And further, I would make a motion to ratify the emergency purchase in the amount of $18,000 even to redevelop well number 3 and the recondition of the pump at the Retreat Wells Water Treatment Facility.
Well, thank you. Tim has made a motion to ratify the emergency purchase of a replacement air blower for the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility from IPS Pump Company for $11,421. And further, a motion to ratify the emergency purchase in the amount of $18,000 to redevelop well number 3 and recondition the pump at the Retreat Wells Water Treatment Facility. All in favor of these 2 motions, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great, that has passed 5-0. And I'll need one more motion to get out of our work as water and sewer commissioners, but I do thank Dan for his expertise.
Thank you,
Jessica?
Dan.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to adjourn as water and sewer commissioners.
Great. Jessica's made a motion to adjourn as water and sewer commissioners. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion has passed. Okay. Unfinished business. We have COVID-related matter. First, let's just see if the if there's a discussion needed for the rule requiring face coverings indoors in public spaces. Is there further action on this that the board would like to take at this time? Okay, then let's discuss hybrid meeting protocols, and maybe Peter would like to introduce this topic before the select board discusses it.
Sure. So you were all on Zoom this evening. As a result of, the recent decisions you've made together and the circumstances and data that we've all been working with, as the reports both from the state and from the CDC over the last 6 or 8 weeks have shown increasing incidences of infection, not increasing in our area in the number of hospitalizations, but nevertheless increasing rates of infection, including breakthrough infections of vaccinated folks. So it's raised a reasonable level of concern, led to the actions you took in August, and has caused you to calibrate when you are together in the select board meeting room and when you are not, based on when the public is going to be involved in the meetings. And so when it's just going to be you alone, and there is some of that work going on these days, that's unusual for the select board, but it's usual for you now. It's a normal thing you were doing during this period of time for, in a sort of month to 6 or 8 week period, while you are interviewing applicants for town manager and making decisions. And with that matter consuming a fair amount of executive session time and a few other significant town business matters that where we have executive sessions that I'm participating with you in and some other town staff. The combination of those has led to quite a few hours of you being in the select board meeting room, masked and distanced, to do that business, because we know that the room does not also need to be available for the public at that time. For these meetings, regular meetings and special meetings, public meetings of the select board, we want to make sure that we're accessible to the public. And so the physical meeting place remains the select board meeting room, so that is, as happened earlier this evening, a place where a member of the public can go and observe the meeting and participate in the meeting. One thing to consider about whether you return there, and as we have done with some other town boards, have the board or the body making the decisions be in the room, but encourage the public to come in on Zoom. That is a method that's being used for some of the other town activities. One thing for you to consider about that is just the limited capacity of that room for the public, if you are also in the room. So if we only have a few people show up, there's plenty of room there. If we have a lot of interest in in-person attendance from the public, there is a potential impact that you might have to shut down a meeting because we wouldn't be able to maintain spacing there and not allow all the public in, and then resume that meeting at a different time at a larger venue where everyone could be in the space together, masked and 6 feet apart. I'm not suggesting that that's a reason that you shouldn't make that switch back, and I'm aware that some of you do feel that it's important for the board to meet in the select board meeting room. So if I can be helpful to the 5 of you as you sort through that together, I'm happy to come back into the conversation, but I wanted to share just that that sort of one logistical matter that I think you should give some consideration to, which is that there will be a significantly smaller total number of people we can accommodate at the select board meeting room than we are able to under normal times.
Thank you, Peter. All right, let's take a read of how we all might feel, and someone like to start. And how do you feel about this issue before I start naming names?
I'll start with a very on the fence position, which will be in no way helpful to anybody. Obviously, from a safety point of view, meeting on Zoom is the safest thing for the board, for town staff, for members of the community that want to come to the meeting. I think it's important to point out for the public who may not really be aware of this, that we cannot hold a Zoom only meeting. We have to provide a physical location for meetings because that is required by law, and the governor's state of emergency last year allowed people to have Zoom only. But folks can go to the meeting room if they wish to. So it's safer to do it from home. Whether it's better is another story. I feel that working in the same room together makes me happier, but whether my happiness is more meaningful than the community's safety, I would say probably not. And I also note that we have high levels of vaccination in our community. I know that everyone on the board is vaccinated. The vaccinations work. And that, I guess my concern is if we go back to Zoom, will we ever get off Zoom? So we had an executive session today from 7:45 this morning until about 3:40 this afternoon, where we were all in the meeting room together, plus a couple of staff, well, one member of staff and one person that we've hired. And I felt very comfortable doing so. There were some sort of little benefits of it, like just being in the same space together allows for a freer discussion of things. It's less rigid. I feel more connected to you all. It's nice to see you all. The impacts of being away from people and just in my little room up here are they're real impacts, but the impacts of disease and illness are also real. And just trying to balance all of that. I do want the community to be safe, and I would assume that members of the community that felt that going to an in-person meeting was not a safe thing to do would access on Zoom. And the fact that they can do that and have shown during the entire time we were on Zoom that many of them will do that. And you can see a few folks in the meeting here tonight. So I'm a little on the fence. If you'd asked me about 2 weeks ago, I would have said I really want to be back in person. I can read a graph, and you look at the cases graph, it's not good. It's almost as high as our highest point. But you look at the hospitalization graph, and it's very different. The vaccines work. They really do. And I would deeply like to get back to something like normal life. And also I want to take, a responsible approach with the community. So that is my spiel. It's not very helpful, but it's true.
All right, who's next? Tim.
Well, I think that was helpful, Daniel. Thank you.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that I've been on the fence. I've been on the side that really was urging the board, I think, to get back together. But I mean, I also can see the other points of view. My son's class, entire school, actually, entire daycare was just shut down because of a couple of positive cases, all of which so far, thank goodness, are asymptomatic or slightly symptomatic. So it's out there, and I think it's just an endemic thing that we're going to start to have to let absorb into our lives of many dangers and risks that we take. So, but having said that, I mean, you know, with the schedule on our very needed private conversations we've been having around the town manager today and tomorrow, and then having, you know, remaining in that space, just feels like you're pushing luck and pushing the odds a little bit. So I'm definitely in favor of finishing out September in this hybrid model. Well, we're going to be hybrid going forward anyway for a while. But I would love it if we could try to keep an eye on the numbers. Like, as Daniel said, the numbers are not so good for cases, but they're quite good for hospitalizations. And the way we started out with this whole thing, how many months ago was it? 20 months ago, is that we wanted to keep an eye on flattening the curve, keeping people reasonably safe as possible without disrupting quality of life when we can avoid that. It's really hard to communicate to constituents how important it is for this board to be meeting in person, but I'm pretty sure I get either 4 or 5 nods when I say it's just so much easier to understand where everyone's at and really make efficient, good decisions for our town when we're physically together in person. So I'm not sure if that's a proposal, but my druthers would be, because we also have this odd situation. We have a meeting next week as well because of shifting a week due to a holiday. It seems a little premature given all the news and the spread that's currently going on in Brattleboro itself to try to do it next week. But I think as early as early October, we could make that our goal. But it's not a hill I'm willing to die on, so I'm willing to shut up and listen to other people's concerns. Thank you.
Jessica, do you have an opinion?
I did, and now I'm feeling differently. So I was going to speak very in favor of meeting in person because, oh my God, it was amazing to finally be in space with you guys and have that very human, like, kinesthetic process that adds to a conversation more than a screen can do. But yeah, Tim and Daniel, I think you're right. I think where we're at as a full community is the case numbers are just not maybe there yet for having full in-person meetings. And I agree, Tim, I would love to keep an eye on things. And I would suggest that when we can do an executive session in person, that we try to do that. I mean, I had this wild dream that, like, maybe we could, like, go there in person and then do our executive session, and then, like, everybody goes to little corners of the municipal center to zoom into the select board meeting. It's way too over the top complicated, but, like, I really value being in person with you guys, and I think that it adds a lot to our conversations. For me, as someone who really processes communication so much better in a physical space with people. Yeah.
Okay. Ian.
Well, first off, I would just like to thank the board. I was, Liz and I do the agenda setting, and I felt like it was very important that we got this to the board to discuss. And I really appreciate each of your positions, and I appreciate where the board is landing on this. I am also in favor of staying on Zoom while we're in this spike. I too can read a graph, but I think it's worth putting 2 words, much like my fellow board members have tonight, just how important it is that we are in person, and that we have been tasked by our constituents to conduct the business of the town in an efficient, productive, the best way that we can. And I firmly believe deep in myself that doing that in person is really the best way to do it. So having this discussion is important. Like, having the discussion about why we're going to continue to be on Zoom for right now is an important part of doing that process, instead of just sort of like making that decision in the agenda setting meeting and then continuing to just do that. So I'm really happy that we could sit here and actually have that discussion now. I think that I really take to heart, and I think we should really consider really checking in on this more often so that we continue to make sure that the board feels that way. And we are watching the numbers so that when we do feel like it's safe, that we don't delay and we move back to being in person so that we can enjoy those benefits and, can really, do a better job. So I just pass my gratitude again to everybody here. Give it back to you, Liz.
Well, thank you. And I want to recognize that I think that that Daniel really got to the heart of the matter when he talked about, his desire to be in person and weighing that against the risk to public health. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And as much as, we would all like to be in person, when the numbers get to the point where we would all feel more comfortable in being in each other's presence with the public, then we'll make a different decision. But right now, first of all, I don't think that 64.8% of Windham County residents being vaccinated is an extremely high number. That kind of bugs me. What, Daniel?
And this is one thing that bugs me. And I tried to kind of say this the other week when we were asked by the reformer about our thoughts on the governor's squishing our attempts to put in health mitigation measures or disease mitigation measures. So the data we're working with at best is county level data. Vermont Digger produces once a week a report on case counts in towns, which pulls from the Vermont Department of Health case counts map. Their map is not very helpful, so Vermont Digger turns it into a table. So Brattleboro, for example, had 24 cases within the last week, which is a higher than usual amount, but not by a very large number. Vernon actually had a similar number, and there are far fewer people in Vernon, and Vernon is much more spread out. So it would be weird for that to happen. And so the governor's rationale, or the governor's staff's rationale for us not being able to enact a mask mandate in Brattleboro was that we have allegedly 90% of the eligible population vaccinated. And that is not data that we have been given access to. That is not data that other Vermont towns and cities are given access to. We're just being asked to trust the governor's numbers. And I want to trust the governor's numbers. I don't believe that the governor's office is trotting out made up numbers, but I would like to have access to them because we cannot make good decisions without good data. So when we were talking about how we'll know when to go back to in-person meeting, right? The graph right now is still like this. I would like it when the graph does this for us to go back to in-person meeting. I don't have a number for it, but I know what it looks like, and then it's going to get down there and it's going to pop along, and then it's going to do this again, probably, if not enough people in the country, world get vaccinated. I'm just kind of mad about it, and I feel that we've been let down by the state in this regard.
Well, I think we're all, I feel similarly. I don't personally, I don't like the governor's office referring to us as making emotional decisions. I think we're making valid decisions in the public health. But what I want to say about the Windham County numbers is that, we are essentially the county hub. And so not only do we get visitors on a daily basis from the county, we get them from New Hampshire, and we get them from Massachusetts and New York and Connecticut. And that's the type of town that we are. And I think we all have to recognize that we're not alone.
They don't generally come to the select board meetings.
No. Peter, would you like to?
Typically, no.
Thank you. Two things. One, just because the Vernon Brattleboro anomaly came up, I just want to make clear that was startling based on our population differences, but it was driven entirely by an outbreak at a particular facility in Vernon. So there was a concentration of cases there that for this particular reporting period looks way out of whack, but there was actual data there to support that. And then in terms of where we go from here, I'm gonna go out on a limb that it seems like there's consensus at this point among the select board. I thank you for that. I know that it's not an easy one to reach. All of us would rather be in person, and the 5 of you have expressed that somewhat differently from one another, have felt it with different levels of intensity. But tonight, really thoughtfully worked through this and rallied around a place that says, for now, it just doesn't feel like the right thing to do. So as far as sort of how to do this piece of business going forward, as Daniel just pointed out, it's going to be a thing where there'll come a time when you feel like it's right. There isn't a magic number that we need to reach that's going to dictate that it's right to go back to in person. So I just wanted to suggest, since we do meet next only one week from tonight, and then the next meeting after that is 2 weeks later on October 5th, it seems reasonable. Maybe we check in on this on October 5th. Does that work for the board?
Yes.
So we would be on Zoom on the 21st and on the 5th, but on the agenda for the 5th, we would talk about going back in person.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody's nodding, right? Is there anyone not nodding?
Tim's not nodding.
Oh, I was nodding. I just wanted to say one last thing, and I promise it's very short. I wanted to just urge my fellow board members. I just want to mention that thousands of parents right now are sending their kids into a situation that is not dissimilar to the conversation we're having, in that so many people are being brave. So many parents are being brave and sending their kids into an unknown situation because the majority of parents recognize that the experience of being in school is more important than the very small risk of their kids getting sick, or certainly if they're getting sick, even having terrible outcomes of that. So these brave decisions are being made every day, especially in a community right now where we've got pop-ups, certain classes, being quarantined. If you're a parent in Windham County and in Brattleboro, you are really in the front lines of this judgment call. And I'd encourage the board to be similarly brave when we talk about getting together in person.
That's interesting, Tim, because, that comment resonates, but makes me feel the opposite. With all this bravery going on, why do we have to add to it? Why don't we just stay out of the fray and have our nice, safe little meetings on Zoom until everything calms down?
I would suggest it shows solidarity with people who, really are out there, essential workers and people who have to work, talking to people every day for a living. And I think it's low risk and a similar risk assessment that every parent has to make every morning when the child goes off. That's my point.
Well, we had such nodding agreement before, so let's just keep it that way.
Okay.
Yes, Daniel.
I feel like we've wrapped up that little thing. My little conversation with Kate earlier just makes me want to prod a little bit if we feel like we're ready to move on from the discussion of hybrid meetings, because this is COVID-19 matters and it's unwanted, I guess. But the executive order from the governor's office, that said we can't put our mask mandate in place, has this little line in it that says changes in public health mitigation measures or requirements impacting the general population shall require approval of the governor. So Brattleboro, I'm sure, could not enact a requirement for proof of vaccination to go to indoor dining, gyms, movie theaters, what have you. That being said, it's a really good idea. And I want this winter, given that like we have high numbers of people vaccinated in this community, I want to be able to live a life that is not just like hiding in my house. And I want to be able to go and have dinner and feel safe. I want to go to this new bar and feel safe. I want their staff who are working there being exposed to people all day long to feel safe. And so if we could enact such a thing, I would say that we should, but I would encourage our local, bars and restaurants to go out on a limb and give it a try. I would wholeheartedly support restaurants, bars, cafes that were requiring vaccination as proof of entry. It's different for a cafe, but like a restaurant where you like book a table, there's already somebody standing at the door. A bar where you have to like show ID to get your beverage, like there's already a process for it. I know it's, a little bit of a pain and maybe some people would be unhappy about it. I just want our community to be safe. And I want to recognize that like we all worked so hard in this vaccination campaign. Like, do you remember like before the vaccines were available and the anxiety we had about when it would be your turn and how excited you were to get it? Like, that doesn't mean nothing, like the vaccines give us huge protection. And I want to take advantage of the fact that like large numbers of our community are vaccinated. So it's a little emotional plea, I suppose.
I agree with you, Daniel, and I would raise that bet to say that when people come into a potential one of our meetings, no one asks them any questions, whether they're vaccinated, whether they have a temperature, whether any sort of rapid testing, none of that goes on. And members of the public are invited to our meetings. And that fact should also play into our deliberations whenever we decide to resume a more public posture. Now, we finished with our unfinished business and we can go on to new business. Traffic safety matters. Let's see. I'm moving over.
I'll speak to them if that's all right.
That'd be great.
We have two this evening. You have some backup material that's been prepared by Dan Tyler related to both of them, and Dan is still in the meeting if you want to bring him into the conversation. I think both matters, however, are pretty straightforward. And Daniel, as the Select Board's liaison to the Traffic Safety Committee, is here also to speak to how thoroughly these got vetted at Traffic Safety. So the ordinance amendment is related to the fact that we can only enforce stop signs in places where the Select Board has designated that they are to be placed as a matter, but through a town ordinance. So earlier this year, we placed 2 stop signs in town as a trial to see if it had the desired impact on the flow of traffic, particularly the speed of traffic in the area around Memorial Park on Guilford Street. So it stops the traffic both in a, I guess it's a southbound and a northbound direction at that spot at the entrance to Memorial Park, stops the traffic on Guilford Street. And it in fact has, we've collected data and observed what goes on there, and it's made the entrance to the park and the entrance to the music center, as well as the overall flow of traffic on Guilford Street, noticeably more safe for the entire community. So we're asking, we, the Traffic Safety Committee and the town staff are asking that you, the Select Board, approve this ordinance change that will make those 2 stop signs permanent in those locations and enforceable. At our most recent Traffic Safety Committee meeting, we were asked by a resident of South Street to install a stop sign where there has traditionally been a yield sign. If you can imagine coming off of Western Avenue at that spot where the West Brattleboro Fire Station is, being on that little piece of South Street there, where you might take a left and go up South Street up the hill, or you might go straight across and go up into the West Village Meeting House. That kind of gives everybody their bearings. At that intersection, which sort of awkwardly is the intersection of South Street and South Street, because those two spurs that come down to Western Avenue are both South Street. I have a feeling at some future meeting, we're going to be renaming one of the spurs now that we've discovered this situation. But for tonight, at the intersection of South Street and South Street, we want to change out the yield sign to be a stop sign. We believe that also will be safer. Here, it's not a speed issue. It's just a movement through the intersection in what is an increasingly complicated situation. There's with the chalet redevelopment and the folks that are living there, there's more pedestrians in the area, and there's a fair amount of vehicular traffic. And so we just feel as though it's going to be safer for the community to have a stop sign instead of a yield sign at that one part of that intersection. Because it's an ordinance amendment, this is a first reading. If you agree tonight that you want to move forward with these changes, then we will do all the proper advertising and the formalities related to an ordinance amendment. And on October 5th, I believe, but October 19th at the latest, we would be back to you for a second reading and a public hearing in order for you to adopt this ordinance amendment and make these 3 stop signs the law of the land. I'll stop there so we can focus on this one for now. And then the second item relates to a different safety measure elsewhere in town.
Are there comments from the board? I'll ask Daniel first because he's the traffic safety person.
Okay, thank you. It's really, as Peter described it, there was great consideration. Guildford Street has been a spot for a long time that people have been looking to see traffic calming measures, and various things have been tried. South Street, as Peter kind of pointed out, has got an increased amount of pedestrian traffic there. I mean, yeah, these are both sensible things that the Traffic Safety Committee, which is a very large committee full of people with all kinds of different perspectives, lots of public safety folks on that committee. So yeah, I believe in its work, and Tim used to sit on it too, so he knows all about the good stuff that happens on traffic safety.
I miss it.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone else? Jess, did you have your hand up? Yes.
I did. Yeah. Just as a newbie, I'm curious, are stop signs always an ordinance that has to go through the ordinance process? Is that in every town in Vermont, or just Brattleboro or select?
No, that's in every town in Vermont.
Good old Dylan's rule.
Yeah, I'm going to resist the urge to take the trip down the rabbit hole about Dylan's rule, but the state statutes require that the placement of such signs, and even things like parking regulations, very precisely, like 20 feet from the intersection of such and such, and the additional 25 feet, blah blah blah, very precise measurements about where there's 2-hour parking versus where there's metered parking and so on. All of that is required by state statute, and we adhere to it so that our regulations are enforceable.
Ian.
So, Jess, I was about to ask that exact question. And I'm following up with an additional newbie question, which I don't think I'm allotted very many more of those. So does that mean if I were to go to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, Appendix C, Article 6, Throughways, Section 16 through 70, stop signs, it would read out every single stop sign in Brattleboro?
Yes.
Not exactly a newbie question, Ian.
Wonder.
But I did not know that. That's very interesting. And so every time we need to add a new stop sign, we have to make an ordinance. We have to change the ordinance to add the stop sign in.
Yes, Peter.
So I can't resist the urge to talk just for a moment about Dylan's rule and home rule. The board is so well aware of this, and I know we don't have a whole lot of people watching, and everybody who's watching is probably all well aware of it too. But when we were pushing the legislature to try to give even a little greater measure of home rule authority to local governments in Vermont over these last few years, this was one of the examples that we cited, and people really were dismissive of, oh, come on, it's just traffic regulations, and it's a little thing, and and it's just so it's what it represents. It's not that having to do this for 10 or 15 minutes tonight and another 10 or 15 minutes a few weeks from now is, you know, the biggest hassle in the world. It's the fact that the parental governance of the state of Vermont requires that municipalities do this, and it's reflected in all the other things that we do. Every time we go looking for, you know, a solution to a problem we've identified that we think needs some attention in Brattleboro, we need to make sure there's something in the statute that allows us to do it. In this case, there is, and it just requires what feels like kind of a silly, onerous process, rather than, you know, some more nimble action of the select board or town staff. But you know, case by case, issue by issue, it's true with everything that we do, and it's not the best way to govern communities, but it's what we have within the structure in the state of Vermont. I'm done now, sorry.
I think we all needed to hear that again. So thank you. Is there more to be said on this issue? Should we move on to the related? Select board members.
I say we can move on.
Okay, Peter?
So the related is, you're all familiar with the RRFBs, which I always say wrong. So I'm going to look at Dan's memo and get it right.
I could do it.
Go, Daniel.
Rapid rectangular flashing beacon.
Yay. So we have used RRFBs increasingly over the last 5 or 6 years. This will be, interestingly, tonight, the first time we're asking you to permit us to use one for the first time in an area that is not in a gateway entrance road to the town. So the places where we've used them on Western Avenue, Linden Street, Putney Road, and Canal Street, they have served two purposes. In every case, they have been both an increase in the safety of the particular spot where we've installed them, and an indication, a general indication to drivers who are coming into Brattleboro on Route 9, Route 5, or Route 30, that you're coming into the congested area of town. This is where people are using the sidewalks and crosswalks, and slow down and be more careful because you're not out on sort of the highway part of the road any longer. Here, we're talking about Fairview Street, and it's the first time that we have found what we believe to be an appropriate location to install an RRFB that is not on one of those entrances to the community. It doesn't serve the dual purpose, but it'll serve the very important purpose at this location of protecting both youth and elderly folks who cross at this crosswalk every day from the north side of Fairview Street at Fairview Village across to the Market 32 Plaza. There is an existing crosswalk there, but if you can imagine coming down Fairview Street from, say, Maple Street, or, you know, out towards West Brattleboro, you're coming in on Fairview towards Canal. There's both a downhill and a fairly sharp curve. It's not so sharp that it's dangerous to a driver, but it is sharp enough that there's not good line of sight. Until you have made it out of that curve and the rest of Fairview Street opens up in front of you, you don't see very far ahead. And so what we have there is a chronic speeding problem. It's another location like Guilford Street, actually, where we've tried a number of different things over the years. We're not really satisfied that any of those have increased safety. But we think that an RFB where somebody crossing, using that crosswalk to get across in between the Fairview Village location and the Market 32 Plaza location will be able to press the button, and drivers will know when they see the flashing lights that there's actually somebody using the crosswalk, that in this location it's warranted, even though it is not one of the main entrances to Brattleboro, because it serves that so crucially important purpose of calling that out to a driver who's coming down that downhill curve. And so town staff and the Traffic Safety Committee are recommending this to you. This one does not require an ordinance. We're coming to you because of the change of policy, because every other place where we've installed an RFB has served that dual purpose. We wanted to make sure that as a policy decision, the select board agrees with town staff and the Traffic Safety Committee to install this one in this location, and to open up the possibility that we might use our RFBs in other locations that are not on main entrances to the town.
Thank you, Peter. Ian?
Great, thank you very much for that, Peter. Given that this is a change in policy, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what discussion went into any kind of concern with light pollution in a kind of mixed, I run on that part of, I run there, and so it's kind of like a mixed commercial residential zone, like it's kind of moving from residential into commercial. So yeah, I think if we're talking about a policy change where we could be using these RRFBs in other locations, what's the discussion about people being concerned about the light pollution?
So I would say we've only received one complaint over the years in all the different locations. It was from the homeowner adjacent to one of the installations. And they were very concerned about it. And there was consideration of it at multiple select board meetings and a weighing of, whether we really needed one there, whether the public interest of having it there outweighed the private interest of the lighting concern. And in the end, the select board did authorize that it be installed at that location. We have not heard, and I don't think that it's a major concern, about the potential for a sort of an ongoing light pollution. These flash only when someone is crossing. So it's a pretty brief use of the lights, and then they go dark again. And so, it's not like an issue related to light pollution or just the bothersomeness of having one that, shines into your yard or something would much more likely come into play adding a street light at a certain location. These RFBs haven't really raised that issue for us.
Jess?
I think Ian brings up a really interesting point, and I wonder if there are ever any considerations for modifications to the lighting so that they don't flash generally, but they do sort of specifically stay off homeowners' property or away from their windows and more towards the road.
I think they are shielded. Is that true, Dan Tyler? Or maybe Daniel?
You have two colleagues who would like to speak to it. Staff can chime in after that.
I gotta jump in here and say, I think we're way off base. I think that the Traffic Safety Committee made a decision about traffic safety, and the town staff has felt that this should come forward to the select board. What we had here was complaints from elderly members of the community who were feeling that they were not able to cross the road to the shopping plaza safely. Now, it's all well and good in the summertime when you think it stays late until, whatever. But like, once we get into the wintertime, it's dark out there. As Peter already described the conditions of the road, you're coming down there. If you cut the road, I think is 25, you have to work really hard to stay the speed limit on that road. If you just let yourself drive naturally, you're going to be coming down there 30 miles an hour easy. Ledgewood Heights is right by there. There's lots of people with kids living there. The minor concern about a tiny amount of light pollution is vastly outweighed by the benefit to public safety. And I just want to say that.
Tim?
I just want to point out that to answer the question, back when I served on the Traffic Safety Committee, we did have somebody, as Peter mentioned, come before us on Western Avenue with a complaint about the occasional light shining into windows. And I suggested a baffle. The baffle got put up for probably $5, and the problem went away. So there's usually a workaround, something like that.
Ian?
Yeah, I just want to defend myself from that position of Mr. Quip there. So to be very clear here, I'm not questioning the decision of the Traffic Safety Committee. What Peter has made very clear here is that there's a policy change happening. So I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about the policy change so that in the future, if someone wants to put up an RRFB in a really residential zone, because the only thing about this thing is that it's big and it makes it flashes, right? It's like, that's the thing about it. So I think it makes sense to at least discuss it. It's not, I don't think it's off base to, I'm not questioning the very well reasoned decision of the Traffic Safety Committee. I think it's just worth discussing in a public meeting at the select board why we're making a policy change in that it's been well reasoned, and we can implement this new policy in other locations that aren't just these barrier roads into like very busy main streets.
Daniel?
So one location where there's an RFB right now is on the corner of Belmont and Canal Street. So that is a residential area of some risk to pedestrians crossing the road. We've had numerous incidents there. On one side of the street, you've got the hospital and that sort of lawn area in front of the hospital. On the other side of the street, you've got residences. The idea that these RFBs are only in some sort of out of the way place is not really like kind of what's going on. There's one right by the retreat, and people are in those buildings, a lot. We've got one elsewhere in town that go on, Peter, help me out here. I just think that they're not exactly in like the middle of nowhere. Like there already is some potential impact, and we don't hear about it because they're good for the safety of the people of the town. And we just had a long conversation earlier about the safety of the people of the town. And I just want to kind of like not think that these two things are equivalent, like a tiny bit of like light pollution versus the, benefit to the safety of the folks of the town.
Peter,
I want to leave the equivalency discussion for you policymakers, but I think, and I hope I can put all of your minds at ease in terms of the degree to which this is actually a thing that we have to deal with, a problem in the community in terms of the light pollution impact. Most of the locations where they exist already, there are residences within view of the device. And when you think about it, there's a reason why that's true, because we don't put them out in the, deeper into the commercial areas, because that's not as pedestrian friendly, right? So the places where we need to make sure that this confluence of pedestrians and vehicles doesn't lead to harm for the pedestrians is where we've been using the RFBs. And so they are visible from residences. And we've only had the one instance where we ever had a complaint. And in that one instance, as Tim said, there was a pretty low tech, easy to implement solution. So I think going forward, you all can rest assured that we can keep our eyes on the prize of the safety benefits of using this tool. And on the rare occasion when it's bothersome to somebody nearby, we also can work with them around that.
I would just like to say, because I haven't spoken about it yet, that I think they're wonderful. And I think that, you could be waiting at certain existing crosswalks for a very long time, and those cars wouldn't stop until you press the button, and then magically the traffic stops. And so I think they're swell. I think they're being used in the appropriate locations, and I'm all for more of them when and where they're warranted. And I also note that the town of Brattleboro has reduced the light pollution tremendously by removing streetlights when possible. So I think it's a good thing. Jessica?
Yeah, I just want to say, Daniel, yes, I'm definitely in support of this. My family uses that crosswalk regularly to go
helpful, right?
And so it's definitely going to make a big difference for us and our safety. But also I think it's important to recognize where the bar is and when the call is for this sort of tool, as opposed to other sorts of tools. And I think that's what Peter was sort of asking for our input on. So I just, after sitting on the Planning Commission for so long, I know that light pollution and those changes to a landscape definitely impact residents and community members, and they want to have an input on it. I remember the stoplight that went in on Oak Street and High Street, the flashing one, had big long conversations about that. So, you know, it's I was concerned, and I'm glad my concerns were set to ease. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
This is that one. There's always one thing on our agenda that you don't know is going to take a half an hour. This is it.
Ian,
I would just like to say that I am fully in support of RRFBs. I simply was interested in having a discussion about what the sort of what the policy was about it. As someone who walks to work every single day, yes, and walks all around Brattleboro, I think, you know, pedestrian safety needs to continue to be one of our #1 priorities. And obviously these are a really important part of that. So I think it's great. And it doesn't need a motion.
well, hold on, because
Sorry,
Jessica.
I was just curious about like if we're talking about where the bar is for implementation of these. If a community member comes and asks the traffic safety committee for a tool like this in their neighborhood, what is the bar that says yes or no?
So there's always a staff report done when we get they're called safety action requests. When we get a safety action request from somebody in the community, we do a staff report on what they've requested, what we know about that area, any data we can share about the usage of that location. And then there's always discussion at the traffic safety committee meetings that includes the person who asked for it. Sometimes it'll generate a lot of interest for a particular neighborhood or more broadly in the community, and we'll get a really much more robust conversation going. That doesn't happen very often. At traffic safety, mostly what we get is the people who have made the request and the people who are analyzing the request, interacting around whether or not it's the right thing for the town to move forward to implement. I'll characterize sort of the range of ways those things turn out and ask that Tim or Daniel correct me if their impression is different from their time on the committee. But I think that as often as not, the outcome is educational for everyone involved, that the committee members and the town staff learn from the concern that was raised about what people in the community are concerned about and how people are using the facilities. And often there's an opportunity for us to also help that person understand the way in which the town can or cannot or should not intervene in certain situations. Sometimes the desired, the thing that's being asked for is you know, not a proper action, right? So sometimes we're asked to put in some piece of equipment or take some other action that is, you know, just empirically not going to solve the problem. We share the concern for the problem, but the requested action isn't going to do it. So then we get talking about what could we do? And sometimes we land in a place where we move forward with something different that addresses the concern. And sometimes we just can't and end up in a place where we wish we could, but we can't. And it's just, there's a real gamut of things. So, you know, I'd say maybe something like a third of them, of the requests end up getting implemented exactly as they were requested. More often, it's a more complicated conversation that either results in no action or a different action.
All right. Yes, Tina.
I mean, I just wanted to kind of call in the fact that like these requests then, yeah, result in stuff. Oftentimes it's like a speed study. Oftentimes like there's been multiple speed studies of that stretch of road done over years, and, you know, that's brought in. It's common for folks to think that there's awful speeding on their road because of an outlier here or there. And then you look at the data, and what you tend to find is that the vast majority of drivers drive responsibly. And so, yeah, those things are weighed. And, you know, I think that the reason for the implementation of the RRFB at that particular location speaks to the vulnerability of the population at that crossing. And I'm really glad that we're going to go and implement it. And I'm glad that we had this deep dive. And if anybody is interested in Traffic Safety Committee matters this Thursday, 8 a.m., you can watch it from the comfort of your home or you can come to the municipal center and stand in the room on your own.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We do have a member of the public who would like to speak. So Gary, would you like to speak on this matter?
Hey, good evening, everybody. How are you?
Hey, Gary.
I have to tell you, that caught me off guard, that light. But when I used to travel down in Keene, they have a lot of those lights and safety things like by the college. But I traveled the normal speed. And going there was a young gentleman crossing and I seen the flashy light, but that instinct automatic kicked in to slow down, let him go across. But I guess my only thing, Daniel, I'm probably going to be there at the traffic safety committee. That's my Halloween antics. Sorry about that. Is to mention maybe perhaps at night the crosswalks can get a little luminous, like a fluorescent, because I noticed the lights aren't that lit at night, nighttime driving, and I traveled the Autobahn up Putney Road, Canal Street, all over, and a lot of different speeds and stuff. So I'm just going to probably bring up a few of those issues and stuff. And at nighttime, it's really hard because there are some flyers down there that come zooming, and especially at night, people make up their own crosswalks coming across the street on Elliott. So some of those places, I guess we can probably map out. And I guess the next question is, how is it maintained and what's the cost going to be to keep it maintained? These lights that are up, Peter?
So they cost about $8,000 each, and there isn't much maintenance cost. They I believe, and if I'm wrong, Dan will seek the floor and correct me. I don't believe we run any wiring to these. I'm pretty sure they're solar installation. Okay. So there's not a ongoing operating cost for that. And they don't require much maintenance. Of course, over the long haul, they do require some maintenance, and they eventually will require replacement. But Dan, anything to add?
No, you got that right. They're solar. I think out of all 7 of them, we had to replace one battery and, you know, the computer panel in one, and that was because it got hit. So other than that, we haven't had any maintenance thus far. And I think the oldest one's 6 or 7 years old at this point.
Yep.
That's good. I mean, thus far, like with the traffic lights, as we know, sometimes at Malfunction Junction, we're going down, they have their own AI, I guess you could say sometimes. But that being said, I guess you can't put a price tag on safety. It's very important to have that implemented, especially around the school areas on Canal Street. I think that's a good place to start, especially during the school time in the mornings. People are rushing off to work with a cup of coffee in their hand and a cell phone in the other. So yeah, I'm really happy that you guys did that. And hopefully we'll be able to get some more up and going, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I would think we need to have a motion, have a vote, have a break. Let's get that done. Motion, Jessica, is that you?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to move that we approve the installation of an RRFB at the Fairview Village crosswalk location.
Great. Jessica has moved to approve the installation of a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, an RRFB, at the Fairview Village crosswalk location. All select board members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right, that's all of us.
RR.
That has passed. And so now let's take a break so that our interpreters also get a break. And let's come back at 8:15. Okay, thank you. All right, well, here we are back again. And we have 3 more items to discuss. Long-term financial plan, Mr. Elwell.
Yes, and Madam Chair, I'm sorry to be not following your lead in, but it's 8:14 and Daniel isn't back. I wonder if we might just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Just leave him.
Look, there he is. Oh. All right. Well,
Okay,
how about that Jeopardy sound? We could, never mind. There he is.
full steam ahead now.
Please.
Okay, thank you.
What am I late? No, 8:15.
No, it's just jumping the gun.
So the long-term financial plan, as the select board is well aware, is not a budget. It is a forecast, and it's a forecast, a 5-year forecast that we prepare and review at about this time each year in preparation for the annual budget process to help us make current year decisions in a longer term perspective. Important for us to not just be doing things that feel right in the moment, but things in a way that helps the town be both sustainable, both financially and in other ways. And so one of the ways we do that is by looking at things sometimes in earlier iterations of the long-term financial plan. We've identified problem areas. I'm happy to report that in this particular update of the long-term financial plan, we don't have a really significant problem to identify and say we're working on it, because we got to get these costs down in a particular area. One example of that for us early on was in employee benefits, but we made some changes to the health insurance program and to the retirement program that saved the town a tremendous amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, that are did not diminish the quality of the benefit for the town employees. But we were able to focus our attention on those because we looked at the longer term trends and saw that those areas of the town's budget were becoming unaffordable. Another example is the workers' compensation area, which was less directly controllable by us, but it was an area where we could give attention and beef up some procedures and try to get under control an area that was suffering inflation far greater than sort of the rest of the town's budget and the economy. And a combination of our own actions and external actions that actually took a broken workers' compensation market and created a more stable situation. So we're basically now we're operating within a more stable environment for workers' comp, and we have improved our procedures. And the combination of those two flattened it right out. The last couple of years, we've had no increase whatsoever in workers' comp. So we're able to do that kind of problem solving by doing long-term financial planning. We also, and this year there is a good example of this, by seeing where there are going to be opportunities. So it's not necessarily, a 1-year thing or a urgent need thing, but more like a longer term goal that we want to achieve and looking for where we're going to have the opportunity to achieve it. An example of that is how we've had this long-term effort to get up to first $1 million a year in commitment to capital expense. And then we renewed that goal to $1.5 million. And we've been working our way slowly towards that. This is a year where we saw, as we were preparing this update, that the falling off of debt service payments from one of the prior borrowings of the town is creating an opportunity to accelerate that commitment to capital. And by accelerating it in an early year of this 5-year forecast, we then have a couple of different things going on. If we're able to achieve that, if you agree when we get to budget, considering the budget, that is appropriate as a policy decision for this upcoming year, then we're going to position ourselves quicker to a place where we have more flexibility in how we're dealing with capital needs. So, we've been talking now year after year about the fact that we have, long overdue capital to address because we're an older community and we've been built for a long time. That's true. We're starting to do better. And now we're starting to fund it in a manner that allows us to actually, not just know that we need to catch up, but actually be doing some catch up. And that's really good. We can accelerate that without having a big spike in the tax rate in order to make that additional commitment based on the forecast that's in front of you. I'll explain why more in just a moment. But the point being that the overall goal, if there was one goal, there's several different benefits that flow from doing this kind of long-term planning. But if there was a particular goal that would, sort of stand out among the others, it's that we want to maintain relatively stable taxes over time. So we don't have wild fluctuations with some years with a very large tax increase and other years where we're cutting the tax rate, only to be followed by another year with a very large tax increase. If we're not planning, those kinds of things will happen to us just by the circumstances of what we're dealing with in any particular year. But if we're planning, we can capture the opportunities to flatten that out. So from a taxpayer's point of view, while the cost of life goes up and certainly the cost of government goes up over time, we can keep that relatively slower and steadier as an increase instead of these wild fluctuations that make it hard for taxpayers and don't really benefit the operations of town government. So you see that, excuse me, you see that in this long-term financial plan over on page 2 in the center of the page. And I'll come back in a minute and talk about the historical information that's up at the top of that page, because I think that's important as well. But the point I'm trying to make about the overall value of doing this exercise and how we apply it and just the way that we think about financial matters once we get into the nitty or gritty work about 6 weeks from now of, week by week reviewing the annual proposed budget, is you can see that the tax increases here are, not small. There are years in the forecast where they could have been smaller, but in order to achieve our longer term goals, particularly related to the funding of capital, if we had, for instance, gone, say, $100,000 more each year over a 5-year period to get up to $1.5 million from $1 million, right? Then that would have ridden this sort of roller coaster effect based on other things that were happening. But because we can take advantage of other things that are happening, like a year when debt service is down, so we put more into capital. Now, in the next years after that, we don't have to put as much more into capital. We can put small increments into capital to keep up with those needs in the manner that we want to and think is important for the town, while we're addressing other town financial needs and keeping the rate of increase in the cost of town government at less than 3% and less than 4 cents increase on the tax rate. That is sort of the essence of why we do long-term financial planning. It begs the question of, have our forecasts been reasonably accurate, or is this just something academic that we do? And honestly, while I feel very strongly that there is real value to this in just how it helps us think about budgetary decisions, I didn't know until I did the analysis of how we have done compared to how we had first projected impact on tax rate. But during this discussion a year ago, Ian asked, well, how have we actually performed compared to how you thought we were going to perform in your forecast? And I said, I don't know, but next year we'll report back to you on that. So we did. And that's at the top of page 2. And what's really interesting to me about it is the way in which, with some variation, but pretty solidly, if you account for the positive impact of almost $1 million a year of new revenue through the local option sales tax, if you bring that in as a hypothetical additional amount of taxes, we land almost exactly where we thought we would. Even from that 5 years ago, the 2016 LTFP, forecasting for fiscal years 18 to 22, we were predicting that there would be 18.3 cents of increase in the property tax rate over that 5-year period. And in fact, the sales tax adjusted figure is 18.9 cents. And the actual figure is only 11.7 cents because of the significant pressure that the creation of the local option sales tax took off of the property tax rate. The benefit of not having to increase taxes and still being able to accomplish our financial goals, or not having to increase taxes as much. And then you can see for each of the other years. So there are some variations. For instance, in the year that we bought the sidewalk plow with cash, that was a decision that wasn't part of this sort of steady as we go, but was placed instead as a separate question in front of the representative town meeting. Shall we, in addition to doing all these other things in the town budget that year, buy a $140,000 sidewalk tractor that is the sidewalk snowplow with cash rather than borrowing? And representative town meeting said yes, and so we did. And so there is a year here in the middle where there's a significantly bigger increase over that period in the tax rate than what was forecast. But, you know, you get down to these last, this last year where for the 1 year forecast from a year ago, where we thought we would be going up 3.7 cents in the tax rate, it actually, sales tax adjusted went up only 3.0 cents, because in between the long-term financial plan in the fall and the budgeting work in the winter, we were able to find some efficiencies and actually come in with a better outcome than that. Let me pause there, since those are sort of the big picture observations I wanted to make about why we do this and how it has turned out, and see if there's anything that you want to ask about or talk about related to that. And then I'll hit a few highlights from this particular update.
Jessica.
Okay, I have one question, and it's about property assessment and when that comes around and how the current housing market might affect it.
We're beyond my expertise. We'll get you a better answer from Jen and Joe. Jennifer Brunell, our town assessor, and Joe Meyer, the assistant assessor. As far as the second part of that question about the, you know, how the current hot housing market will affect this. But there will be a townwide reappraisal done. It will need to be done in the next few years. It takes a while to plan one and get into the state's queue on that. So it's not going to come upon us in a hurry. It's going to be something where there's a lot of advance notice and a lot of advanced planning. When it does happen, it will substantially affect, its whole purpose is to substantially affect the distribution of the tax burden, to make sure that we get recalibrated to fair again at that moment, for how we may have gotten kind of out of whack over a period of years. So typically what happens, it's not statistically always exactly like this, but it'll be pretty close. You know, when these reappraisals are done, normally about a third of the properties kind of land where they already are. Their value might go up, but relative to other properties, they're going to stay in about the same proportional share of the tax burden. So when everything gets readjusted and the tax rate goes down to reflect that property values have gone up, they'll end up paying a tax bill that's really similar to what they were paying already. And there'll be about a third of the people who come out ahead, so to speak. Their relative tax burden is going to go down. And about a third of the owners will pay a bigger tax bill relative to the other taxpayers in town. That's pretty inevitable, because the whole purpose of the exercise is to rebalance and start again at equal and then move on from there. Exactly how that'll be affected this time around by, you know, a recent significant increase in values, I don't know.
Tim.
Peter, were you looking for general comments, or did you want to go through first?
It's really up to the board. I wanted to pause there because those were the two general observations I wanted to make, and then I'm just going to hit 4 or 5 what I think are highlights from the specific update.
Okay, I have a couple of highlights to hit, but super quick, but I could wait till after yours because I'm kind of interested to see what your highlights are. So.
Okay.
Ian.
Yeah, I'm curious, are doing LTFPs something that's just general practice, or is it something that you've implemented, Peter, and is the next town manager going to kind of like be surprised at this? And are we going to sort of need to instruct them, or will they like just be like, great, you know, I'm already planning for the next one, sort of thing?
Sure. So that will depend. You know, there's a lot of different ways to do this job well, and you know, different managers have different strengths or particular tools that have worked well for them elsewhere that they bring to the next place. So I certainly don't want to try to predict how important this particular annual exercise will be to the next manager. It is one that I personally think is important in general. It is a financial best practice to do this. And it was useful and important to me in my last job as a town manager in a very different community for very different reasons than it has been useful here. Here, Brattleboro hadn't been doing a lot of long-term planning. In the planning department and in the planning commission and that kind of planning, yes, but financial planning, no. And in some of the like project planning, it was much more, we were, well, an example is we were borrowing money to buy vehicles and spending money on interest, on short-term borrowing to buy vehicles. That was a habit that we had gotten into, but was, you know, costing the town money and making it harder in any given year because we weren't planning ahead, we weren't committing enough money to capital. We were falling behind on our needs without gaining a financial advantage from the savings, so to speak, because we were borrowing for things we didn't need to be borrowing for. Those are the kinds of impacts that you avoid if you're doing longer term financial planning. And in fact, you know, we turned that ship and completely around and are heading in the other direction now because we've got the 25-year plan for how we replace capital equipment. And so we're paying even for fire engines now with cash. We put a little away each year. And when we have to buy $1 million fire engine, we're going to have $1 million available. And in the meantime, we've been making money on the money instead of paying somebody for, you know, a $50,000 vehicle and paying interest on that to, you know, buy it like with a car loan. Mm-hmm. So sorry, it's a long-winded answer. What I would say is this was a critically important thing for us to do in my early years here because of how we were trying to change some not so good practices and establish good habits. Going forward from here, you know, the town's in a different place now. You'll be working with a different manager and you'll decide together whether this particular exercise is important to continue in this manner, maybe a better manner. Maybe there's somebody who's been doing something similar to this that's more robust in some manner that you're going to just be delighted with a year from now. But I don't know.
Thank you.
Jessica?
I do have one more like very general broad question, and it's about so someone when they look at a long-term plan like this might see many years laid out without structural change or without sort of investments in the things that have been hot in the moment. How is a long-term financial plan a tool that can support those conversations?
That's a really good point. And I would say that's an area where we haven't used this as well as it can be used. And that's honestly compared to the work I did with this same exercise in a place where I was fortunate to have, you know, more staff and more money. We did better at that kind of analysis to blend in, you know, if we do this, it looks like this. And if we do that, it looks like that. So the forecast report was actually more complicated. It involved some of those policy choices. Instead here, and we try to be transparent about this in the reporting of it, what we're anticipating is in a sort of relatively steady as we go manner, other than those things that we've identified as needs. So, you know, I mentioned a couple of those earlier. There were areas we needed to get some costs under control. So in those areas, we actually showed the forecast with, you know, what we were trying to fix. And then, you know, in the reverse of that, trying to build up continue to build up our cash commitment to capital expenses. So we do establish in here sort of how we are going to try to achieve large policy goals. What we don't do a particularly good job of in this is getting granular about potential changes in programming that, you know, if we did less of this and more of that, what that might look like in the long-term plan. We do tend to do trend forecasting rather than analysis of choices.
Thank you.
Sure. Shall I go on?
Please.
So continuing on, and now I'm just going to hit a few highlights as we go on through, you know, the final 3 or 4 pages of the report. we mentioned about the really positive impact of the local option sales tax. So we actually used data to anticipate how much that would yield at the time that Representative Town Meeting made the decision to implement what Tim had proposed to the select board and the select board had embraced as being a positive move. And that was $630,000 a year. And almost immediately, we found that was too low. And even though it came from actual data, it wasn't a guess. In the very first year, we got 833,000, and year after that, we got 953,000. So we have been able to up the forecast of how much that sales tax is going to yield, which is one of the things that helps us to keep the tax rate more steady and address the additional contribution to capital. Rooms and meals, we've seen it decline, but it didn't bottom out. But it has declined and it stayed down. We had, the 2 years of COVID impacts. We're down from up around 440,000 down to about 375. And so what we've forecasted is slowly coming back up off of that. Trying one other thing I didn't say tonight, I usually say, we try to be conservative in this. What we want to do is set the town up for the likelihood that revenues will come in better than we have forecast and expenditures will come in lower than we have forecast, because we don't want to get, overly aggressive with the numbers and get really optimistic and then end up really disappointed in how things turn out. We'd rather do the other way around. And so one of the examples of that is, while there's likely to be some bounce back in rooms and meals tax as we get into a more normal economy coming out of COVID, we can't know how fast that's going to happen or exactly how it's going to impact the rooms and meals tax. And so we think it's important to just look at little incremental increases in the forecasting. Now, if we get a year where we bounce right back up over 400, that'll be great. And next year's forecast would be affected by that. But for this year, what we're saying is $10,000 a year. That only takes us back up, not even as far as where we were in the peak year at the end of the 5-year forecast. There are other things that are mentioned in the written report that's posted online, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to just restate each one. I want to hit a couple of other highlights. We don't assume in this forecast any use of fund balance. We have zero use of fund balance in each of the 5 years of the forecast. That's important because except when something really bad like Irene happens, there will always be a surplus. If we're managing our operations properly, there will be anywhere from a small surplus to a 2 to 4% of general fund surplus. So, if we're like less than $200,000 in the terms of a $19 million budget, that's getting really tight, right? That's close to where we might actually have a year in the red. So, we're working in a trying to hit a number that might be more like $200,000 to $400,000, and we pretty typically hit that number for a year-end, excess of revenues over expenditures. Sometimes, for reasons that we explain, go take a deeper dive with fiscal year by fiscal year, when we actually see the real impacts of something that changed in a particular year. Sometimes it's been a substantially higher number. It might be $800,000. When that happens, we owe an explanation, because if it just happened randomly or out of convenience, there's a strong argument that can be made that we're collecting more taxes than we need to be collecting to have that kind of extra money around at the end of the year. But again, we're always shooting for something more like, the 2 to 400, 3 to 500 range. And when it's higher, we give a good detailed explanation of how that happened. But in any event, year after year, we have some additional cash available, primarily through those annual surpluses, sometimes through other accounting factors, that each year we determine how much is 10% of the town's budget that needs to be set aside to satisfy our guideline for our unassigned fund balance in the general fund. And then how much money in the general fund is there above and beyond that marker. And some years it's been as little as 100,000, 150,000. Some years it's been as much as $1 million. And so in any given year, we're able to look at that, what we call excess fund balance. It's just the accumulated fund balance, like the savings account, above and beyond the amount that's above and beyond the 10% standard that we're saving, basically like insurance. That is useful, but it's only useful in terms of doing good, solid financial management. It's only useful for one-time expenditures. If we put it into the recurring operating expenses of the town, then the year that we only have 100,000 instead of 600 or 800 or $1 million is very painful, because you either have to cut services or have a very big tax increase. So the way you avoid that is by taking excess fund balance and using it for one-time expenses. And we most often, but not only, use it for capital expenses, because again, we've been catching up to our capital needs, and we have a lot of capital needs. We're an older built community. So that's been a good place to put them, because in a year where we have a lot of fund balance, we can get more done in catching up on projects. In a year when we don't have as much, then we just don't get as much capital work done. Last year, this current budget is a good example of a decision that was made to use some fund balance for a non-recurring expense that wasn't capital, and that's the website upgrade and the community engagement work. So $75,000 in the current year budget is being committed to that work that didn't have to come from taxes. It came from fund balance, because we had enough accumulated fund balance to be able to fund that. And it's not going to be a recurring expense. It's going to be a project cost in order to improve our operations in that regard. So that's one of the key ways also in which we anticipate landing ultimately in a better place than what has been predicted, is because we anticipate that, except in very bad years, very unusual circumstances, we will always have some surplus. We will always have some available fund balance. But because we can't know how much that's going to be, this forecast presumes zero fund balance in every budget. And let's see, we've talked about the capital. We have a placeholder in this forecast for potential salary increases for employees, because we're entering a collective bargaining year. So as we go into the bargaining with the employees, we can't be sure of exactly where those monies will be spent, but we do know that there will be some increase in costs that'll be different from what we can forecast when we're just in the years of implementing existing collective bargaining agreements. So we put a $200,000 placeholder in this forecast for potential salary increases. And we note here, as we have the last 2 years, that the overall rate of annual increases in departmental expenses in our budgetary nomenclature are those costs that are assigned to a particular department that are not related to personnel. So it's consumable supplies or purchase of a little, small equipment that isn't a capital asset, or those kinds of things. Sometimes contracting, actually in some departments, quite a lot of contracting expense. In the first few years of doing long-term financial plans, this was an area of very slow growth in the town's budget, very constrained spending. And we didn't think it was a problem. It wasn't like under investing in capital over the years. This was just an area where our expenses stayed really stable. The last 2 years, that's not been true. It's not true in this one as well. The reason why is the same as you've probably gotten tired of hearing. Stormwater related expenses for the town. That's a Department of Public Works operating expense. It hits this part of this category of expenditure, and it is increasing exponentially at this time. On next week's budget, agenda rather, a week from tonight, you'll be hearing updates about the work that the town is doing related to stormwater management and the creation of a stormwater utility. So, we are taking steps in that direction, but for now, for this forecast, in the absence of having, knowledge of what we'll be doing instead, this is an example, Jess, actually, of where in a more sophisticated long-term financial plan, you might actually show it this way and show it separately without these expenses having, hypothetically created the stormwater utility. We just haven't, we've invested ourselves in other priorities rather than taking that deeper dive. This is a pretty intense exercise as it is. And with our staff and our variety of activities, I've just not been able to take this to the level of doing that kind of options analysis with it. Perhaps it is something you'll do with the next town manager, or perhaps you'll do, other things that are valuable in this area of work. But the way that manifests in the way that we've been doing the long-term financial plan is we do forecast that the additional commitment to stormwater management in the long-term plan here shows that that's an increasingly significant burden to the town. Kind of like how we were talking about earlier about the employee benefit costs or the workers' comp costs. That's an area that needs our attention, and it's getting our attention because of the exploration and now steps towards a stormwater utility. So in the future years of doing this update, it would show that these expenses would trail off. There'd be a benefit to the general fund when they go away, but they would be showing up instead over in the stormwater utility fund. I think that's probably, actually, there's one last thing I ought to say, because it's similar to that. It's getting clearer and clearer, but not yet enough to know an outcome about how we might move forward with the municipal center. And so what we have done for the purposes of this forecast is pretend that we aren't planning to do a big project with the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, because to assume a certain outcome of that path would be pretty bold on staff's part at this point, when there's major policy decisions to be made in the weeks and months ahead. And so when those decisions have been made, the impact of those decisions upon this forecast and future forecasts will become really clear. And we can talk about those decisions in the context of this kind of a forecast. But for now, in the absence of those decisions, what we're representing for the costs of the municipal center are 5 more years, as if we were just going to continue the operation as it is today. Now I'm done.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's great. Are there more questions and comments from select board members? Daniel?
When we were looking at the sales tax numbers, it reminded me that retail cannabis is coming down the road, and that one of the ways in which Brattleboro as a community will benefit from that is the local option sales tax revenue that will come from retail cannabis, because the state did not enact some other way that local municipalities will get revenue from it, correct? Or am I misremembering?
Correct.
Nope. As of right now, you're correct.
All right. So I know that like the whole kind of watchword was, yes, conservative predictions that will probably be outmatched, but it's very likely that the sales tax number will increase in a probably not unsubstantial way. So yay.
Yep.
So
Great.
Tim, you're representing us and other towns on the Cannabis Commission. Have you met yet?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I was a little reticent to give a status update in my comments, but for the next meeting, I plan to. It's a rapidly moving, fluid situation, as some people like to say. And I will say, because of Daniel's last comment, the arguments about the appropriateness of towns getting a piece of that revenue pie, the taxation piece, is not over. It seems like there's some support within the committee recommendations. So I'm trying for it still, even though the legislature has kind of poo-pooed the idea as a whole. That idea that towns deserve support for all the work they're going to be doing for these sales is going to come out to some extent, possibly with another push for taxation piece, or certainly in the fees. That's what I'm fighting for. So
Great. Well, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you at next week's meeting.
Yeah, and I did have a couple comments. I don't want to step
Please.
on any.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and they all have to do with things that just appear conveniently at the bottom of page 2. Again, with the local option sales tax, just as somebody who still bears the wounds of that big fight that we had to get that that passed.
Oh, come on, they've healed.
Come
Well,
on.
mostly, yeah, but I mean, I still get comments in local shops, but when I ask them, you know, show me the evidence that really your business has suffered, I don't really get much back. Anyway, the Brattleboro downtown has not collapsed into the Connecticut River due to it. So, and not only that, we have what we're projecting to be $1 million of non-taxpayer revenue, which is great. I just wanted to underline that right under that, the meals and rooms, while it did dip, and it seems to have stayed dipped for 2021, as Peter pointed out, it didn't dip as far as we had thought. So, you know, from a 437 to a 375 and a 371 is not as catastrophic as we were fearing. And I think that's something very positive to understand for all of our businesses, not just downtown. And then the last thing I wanted to just point out is that the employee contributions to health insurance premiums is sort of this pilot program that we put in a few years ago, where we're asking for very small contributions from employees towards towards health insurance, because as Peter points out in the next page, you know, if you add health insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and general liability insurance, you get to 13.2% of our entire budget. And that's a huge chunk. I mean, that's like stunning. And it, you know, it goes up every year. The current projection, 5% a year, I guess, is reasonable. So as I said from the start, I'm supportive of a discussion about raising that employee contribution, because you must bring that recognition in the discussion of wages, because where some of our wages still don't rise to the level that I'd like to see them at for some of our employees, our healthcare packages for employees are very generous when you compare it to other municipalities, when you compare it to businesses, certainly. They're very generous. So that's an area where we should have a robust discussion about possibly asking for a little bit further contributions. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks.
Are there other members who want to speak? I just would like to say that I really think that the timing of this presentation is really important, because it allows us to take this deep view of the budget right before we begin the fall budgeting process. So it's kind of a really good place for us to start our budget in the fall.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see, what's next? We get to introduce Patrick Moreland. Hello, Patrick. Oh, wait, you were just waving. Okay, good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ooh.
It's not gonna work.
Yes.
Hold on a second.
Patrick, while Patrick is dealing with his major echo concerns, let's hear from Kurt Dames, who has his hand up.
That's also Patrick.
Yeah.
Doing it all.
Hello, Kurt.
Still muted.
Kurt, you're muted.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Kurt Dimes. Thank you. I would just like to say that on an unpleasant note, we still have climate change, and we haven't changed our long-term outlook on that with respect to our fiscal responsibilities. People have known about it for a while, yet the idea of the unassigned fund balance has not been changed accordingly. We have a growing threat. Everybody recognizes the growing terrible threat, but the way we prepare for it has not changed. So I would hope that the select board consider a separate climate emergency fund or an increase in what we think of as a proper percentage of the budget for the unassigned fund balance. Think of this as, in the worst sense, money for a rainy day to consider for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Kurt. Thank you. Okay, Patrick, are you ready?
Well, let's give this a try. One more second. One more try.
Patrick,
It's very dramatic.
he could come to my office and he won't echo. That's better.
All right, this time it's going to work. Oh, one more second.
Patrick.
Dramatic now. Okay.
There's so many microphones in that room.
This is government happening right here.
Who's the tech to the tech guy? That's the question.
Yeah, it is.
Does that work?
Oh, it's coming to the TV.
No, it's not coming out of the TV. It was coming out of your laptop.
Better.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Excellent. Good to know.
So Patrick,
Apologize for that.
you're going to talk about the ARPA funding.
Yeah, absolutely. Here to talk about the ARPA funding, but I apologize for the microphones and the speakers and stuff. We've been changing the way we do hybrid meetings and well, we just learned something.
Okay.
So I'm here this evening to give a brief update on the ARPA funding. And the reason that we're here tonight to talk about this is because there's been some really important changes and updates, and I want to make sure that the board and the public are informed about those. As you may recall, the last time we discussed the ARPA funding was probably early summer, maybe around June. And at that point in time, there was beginning to be a bit of a rub between officials from the state of Vermont and the US Treasury. The US Treasury has created what they call the interim final guidance, and I'll get back to that in just a second. But the interim final guidance for use on spending ARPA monies, which is designed to guide local municipalities like Brattleboro, big cities like New York City or Chicago, counties, and even state governments, even tribal nations. And that's all well and good, but when you get to Vermont, there's a sort of a misalignment, because while it's clear how you fund municipalities, it's not really clear how you fund county level government. We really don't have county level government in Vermont. So the governor's office and the congressional delegation were in conversations with the US Treasury. Thankfully, those resolved themselves at the end of August, and it's now very clear that both the funds set aside for municipalities will go to Vermont municipalities, and the funds set aside for county governments will also be apportioned to municipalities in Vermont. What that means is that we now know exactly how much money is going to be coming to town of Brattleboro. It's about $3.4 million, and it's going to come to Brattleboro in two tranches, one in 2021 and one in 2022, of about 1.7 million. And I'm pleased to be able to let you know that we've received the 2021, that is in hand and in the bank. And so that's just news we didn't have even a couple of weeks ago. So that's good. In reading over the interim final guidance from the US Treasury, there are four categories of funding, or rather four categories of spending for which the funds can be used. And I just want to kind of highlight those four. The first one is to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. The second one is to provide premium pay to essential workers. The third one is to fund governmental services to the extent that there has been a reduction in governmental revenue. We've talked about this one already to some extent in the manner in which it applies to the parking fund. So that's a really clearly eligible activity. And then the last category is to make investments in water, sewer, and broadband. So that's a really big range of potential projects. And what's kind of nice about that is it's flexible in that it can be available to states to fund what states do, and it can be available to fund municipalities like Brattleboro to fund what we do. And so there's a lot of flexibility there, and that's kind of exciting. We've also learned that with these financial resources comes certain pretty strict obligations. Chief among those involves the reporting of the use of the funds. And what we've learned is if Brattleboro was to use the funds, no problem. We have a very capable finance department. We can report on anything we spend money on, and we can report in ways that are satisfactory to the state government or to the federal government. That's not an issue. If we were to fund someone else to do something else, we would not only need to report on our providing the money to that subrecipient, but we would need to be able to report on what they did with it. So there's some pretty significant obligations that come with the receipt of these dollars. They really want to be able to track how they were used. So if we use them, that's easy. If we provide them to someone else, we then need to be in position to report on their use of the funds. And that's just an obligation. It is unlikely to change with the final guidance, and it's certainly something we need to be thinking about when the board begins to make decisions about what we do with these dollars. Thankfully, we do have some time. The obligation is that we must, what they call, obligate these funds by the end of 2024, which means we need to know what we're going to be spending those on, and we need to obligate those by contract or some other suitable method. But they don't need to actually be spent until 2026. Now that's a long ways off, and I'm not suggesting that we allow them to sit idle and do nothing about this for years and years. But I think staff recommends that it does make sense for us to wait till the final guidance comes out and not operate from the interim final guidance. Thankfully, the final guidance is expected to come out either in December or January, right around that time period. And at least if we wait until then, we will know we are operating from the full and complete guidance from the U.S. Treasury rather than any sort of interim step. Be happy to take any questions.
I don't have a question so much as a comment in that, you know what, I'm glad that we have this time, because from what we understand from when Senator Ballant was here, you know, the state has received money and the state has initiatives that will affect Brattleboro in various ways. And also there's federal infrastructure bills and social infrastructure bills, which include climate change, that are pending. So I think it's important for us all to be patient, to wait to see how it all shakes out and what our priorities are in that overall context. And I appreciate your update. Tim, I see your hand rising.
Thank you. Patrick, when you say, maybe I'm getting ahead of the board, but I think there was at least a bunch of nods when we sort of surmise that the loss to our parking system would be a very no-brainer use for these ARPA funds, and certainly wouldn't use them all up by any degree. Are you suggesting that even that use, we would still wait until the final guidance, even for that action, or?
I don't think there's an imminent need to do that. That really is an easy and obvious use. One of the nice things about the guidance as it stands currently is that they've provided basically an Excel spreadsheet, and it says this is how you determine lost revenue. You put this number in here and you put this number in here, and bada bing, bada bing, bada bing, and you know this is the outcome. And in so doing, what the Treasury said is they would like to be able to calculate lost revenue in the same way in every city, county, state across the nation, rather than allow each community to decide for itself what it means by lost revenue. So we could do that, and we could do it quickly. I don't see any jeopardy in waiting till December or January to at least get the final guidance out. But if the board wanted to take action on that, we could move in that direction if you so chose.
Peter?
Oops.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that while staff certainly would recommend that that be the first use, right? That is the one place we all know we suffered a loss. As Patrick said, it looks like there's going to be very clear guidance. There already is clear tentative guidance on how to calculate that loss. And so, yeah, I think before other more complicated decisions are made about how to prioritize the uses, making that transfer to the parking fund would be an important first step. And because we're in the early stages of a fiscal year, with the guidance, the final guidance expected out in December or January, and still 6 months left in the fiscal year at that time, I think it makes all the sense in the world to get final guidance, be sure we know that we're using the final formula. And then sometime early in the new year, you could take that as the first step and look at where you want to go from there with the rest of the money.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel?
First off, I would like to note that these funds have a name and there's an acronym, and I propose calling it SLUFRUF.
I like that.
The SLUFRUF money. Although the ARPA funds is probably going to stick, so whatever. Secondly, perhaps more germanely, Liz, I mean, I note that like water and sewer investments are a use. We have a big water and sewer project that we're, taking on debt for. I could imagine a situation where we could take on less debt by using some of this money. And then, maybe make an equivalent investment in some other thing that we've never been able to do and dreamed of, using general fund money that has less, fewer strings on it. I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there. Like, if we were to use money to kind of reduce the cost of our borrowing on a water and sewer project, that whilst that could, result in lower taxes, we've already agreed that we're going to borrow that kind of money. We expect to kind of plan for it in future budgets and whatnot. And so it would be nice to get something exciting out of it rather than just slightly lower borrowing, if that was a consideration. I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Ian?
I have kind of an annoying question. How do we define revenue? So, like, here's an example, and I don't think this is really applicable to Brattleboro, but I think my mindset and where I'm thinking could be applicable in some way that I'm not thinking of right now. But for example, like our revolving loan fund. So we give money out, it comes back in. That money coming back in, is that revenue? Like, is the loss of that money, even though we like had it already, like, could that be considered? Like, if we lost it, could it then be used with ARPA money to be reimbursed because we didn't get it? So I'm just kind of curious, like, is it just the kind of more ordinary sort of ways that the town pulls money in that we could get reimbursed for and be made whole, or are there more creative ways that we can like squeeze revenue as like a term.
So Ian, that is not an annoying question at all. But let me ask a potentially annoying clarifying question, which is, are you asking, would it be possible for us to replenish the RLF on any defaulted loans?
I mean, I think in my hypothetical, that is the question. I don't know if that's like really something that we would want to do, or even if that's like something that would be necessary. But I guess, you know, I'm thinking about just, I don't know if that mindset or that kind of thing could be applied in other ways.
Yeah, just, you know, off the top of my head, I'm thinking it probably couldn't, but you know, that's an interim answer.
And are you saying, Ian, that there's a parallel between a COVID-related loss in the parking fund and a COVID-related default on a loan?
Well, I think the idea being that, so if this whole idea is that you're not trying to like, you're trying to make a town live through COVID. So town gives money out to a local business a couple of years ago or whatever to help them start. And then the town's like, we need the money back. Business says, I guess I gotta close my doors. I've got all this money I gotta pay back. Federal government steps in and says, well, let's forgive this, like, you know, let's alleviate some of that pressure off this business. Business can stay in business. It floats through COVID. It sort of does what it seems to do, what ARPA is trying to do, but I don't know if it is falling within the framework of how I understand these interim guidelines to be. And again, I don't know if I necessarily think that this is, I'm kind of speaking very hypothetically because I'm just trying to understand each of these categories, and some of them make a lot of sense to me and are pretty straightforward. The revenue one actually seems kind of broad, at least in how I'm reading it.
So what I would say to that, Ian, is that's something I should look into. You know, our ability to provide loan forgiveness or something like that to any of our borrowers is certainly something we ought to be able to get a, you know, really clear guidance on. I am a little concerned at first on looking at that third category because the actual use of funds is for the provision of governmental services to the extent that there has been a reduction in revenue. And so, you know, we will need to look into that more carefully, but I certainly can do that.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
I did see some hands. Peter, Daniel?
You know, Patrick's rereading of the third point makes it kind of more clear to me. I was thinking about the kind of two policy decisions that we made. You know, one, the kind of moratorium on disconnections for water and sewer utility customers, right? So like we know that we're down in revenue in that area and it's because of COVID. There's also like a ton of money kind of flowing through the state right now that's probably going to fix that to an extent. Yeah, I was just kind of wondering about sort of making those like funds whole again and whether that would be a possible use. I guess I wasn't quite thinking along Ian's lines with like the defaulted loan, more like the kind of replenishing the fund aspect.
Tim?
I think more exciting to me is the point number 4, but you know, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Maybe the final guidance will tell us, you know, the definition of necessary investments. But I mean, I'm thinking of things that can be used to make Brattleboro more resilient going forward. As Kurt pointed out, you know, we need to be spending funds on climate change. I hate the word initiatives, actually. You know, concrete climate change actions that will actually result in a positive future for Brattleboro, or a more positive future, given what we know, what we've been learning the last few years. So that part.
Measures, but less concrete. Less
Yeah.
actual use of concrete.
Permeable.
More permeable than concrete.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the more exciting piece of it for me, is that sort of that piece, the investments piece that we can take advantage of, hopefully.
Thank you, Tim. Ian, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had just one thought. I think this is probably to Patrick. Do you think, do the great folks at Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns have like any kind of plan to have some work product of like a list of things that they know would be approved? Or like, because I'm imagining that like every single town is going to have some money and are going to be like, okay, like what can we do with this? Is there some thought as to the league sort of having some, be thinking about it now so that we've got some sort of starting places to, oh well, okay, this I want to make sure that we explore all of the options, and I'm wondering if that work is being done.
What I can say is the League of Cities and Towns has hired a professional to assist towns in this consideration. That's Katie Buckley. Many of you may know her. Katie has put together frequently asked questions that was included in the backup for anybody listening at home who hasn't had a chance to take a look at that. It's certainly available with the select board backup. I've been in touch with Katie a few times already about this kind of thing. It's interesting. She has told me most communities reach out to her and say, hey, look, we want to do this. Can we do that? And so it's less about, hey, what are the possible things, but so much as we really just want to do this. How do we get that done? But we're going to continue to work together. Again, this is funding states, cities, counties. There's a lot of things here that this can be used for. And we're going to work together with them and review the final guidance, and then be back to talk about what kind of things the board or the community would like to see this money invested in.
Well, that's great that this person is so familiar to us all, and that's makes it nice. But also, I mean, we haven't even had, we haven't even heard from town staff about what initiatives they might be thinking. So I would just say we are really early and need to take our time and gather all the information that we can, because, I know we're doing important work now, but boy, we're going to have even more important work coming up. Jessica?
I'm just wondering if any part of these funds can be used for the administration of these funds or evaluation of use of the funds. Like you were saying, if we work with another entity, the reporting would be a different structure. So is any of the cost of that built into the money, or the allowed expenses?
My belief is that yes, administrative costs would be an eligible expense. But again, final guidance it would give us the final rule on that.
Okay.
Peter?
And if you decided at some point you wanted to apply these funds in a manner that required some administration, and there were constraints in the rules from ARPA that got in the way of that, that also is the kind of one-time expense. When we talk about things that are not capital improvements or capital purchases that are one-time expenses, that would be an appropriate use of fund balance to help make what is ultimately determined to be the best use of the ARPA funds. You might pay with town money for the oversight that's necessary in order to implement the ARPA money the way you want to. But all of the, getting into those multiple layers of complexity is exactly why you ought to wait until there's final guidance before you start making choices.
Could you supplement it? Could you supplement the ARPA money with fund balance, considering the ARPA money will be also one-time expenditures, probably?
Yeah, but the
like just like add it on and like.
I think you won't want to do that. I mean, again, once you get into real decision-making, following real rules, you'll be better able to make those kinds of choices. But what I was suggesting was if there's an administrative function that you want to fund that isn't allowed under the ARPA rules, you could fund that with town money and then use the ARPA money and show the tracking of the ARPA money for the purposes that are allowed under ARPA. I think it's equally true that you could do and, you know, invest in an ARPA permitted function and supplement that with town money. But I think you'd want to be careful about mixing them like that because of the tracking issues.
Okay. Well, Patrick, thank you so much. And we have one more item to discuss. Oh, Kurt, would you like to talk to us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
About the ARPA funds, my reading is that the distribution of the funds as COVID relief would be allowed, and that the town government should consider distributing the monies to people, especially to people below the median income. BCS Economist has prepared a brief about the different legal ways of distributing the money, which should be of interest to you, Peter. But besides that, if it wasn't going to happen that way, we've been talking about, hearing from town staff and select board, but also the RTM and the people might want to say how the money is to be spent, of course, within the guidelines. And one way that it could be done would be through a people's budget, an abridged budget without those items which would be disallowed under the guidance, could be used for a template for the people to distribute the money, perhaps by vouchers to the different parts of the town government. Anyway, there are lots of ways, and Dan was saying he wanted something exciting. I think a people's budget would be very, 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 very exciting, and I hope you consider it. The write-up, the brief about legal distribution methods, I could share with you very easily. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kurt. Okay, there's one last item on our agenda, which is FY21 committee and board vacancies. How about I just read them? Let's see. ADA committee, 5 vacancies. Agricultural Advisory Committee, 1 vacancy. Arts Committee, 4 vacancies. Cemetery Committee, 1 vacancy. Citizen Police Communications Committee, 1 vacancy. Conservation Commission, 1 vacancy. Development Review Board, 1 vacancy. Development Review Board alternate, 2 vacancies. Energy Committee, 2 vacancies. Fence Viewer, 3 vacancies. Hazard Mitigation Committee, 2 vacancies. Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood, 1 vacancy. Planning Commission, 1 vacancy. Senior Solutions Advisory Council, 1 vacancy. These are all very important. I'm sure that there's something of interest for everyone. Jessica, did you have a comment?
I just have a question, maybe for Peter. Are any of these committees unable to meet because they're unable to have a quorum with the current number of participants?
The ADA committee is currently in that situation. I believe it's the only one.
So tell your friends, discuss it at the water cooler tomorrow. Let's get some volunteers. Is there anything else to discuss before the board this evening? I will entertain one final motion. Daniel.
I move to adjourn.
Daniel's moved to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you
See
very
you at
much.
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
everybody. Thank you.